Good evening and welcome to World News Tonight. I'm Adam Yasin. President Donald Trump insisted after meeting Volodymyr Zelenskyy on Sunday that Russia wanted peace and wished Ukraine well. Vladimir Putin's response was swift. The Russian dictator told his generals on Monday to press on with capturing more Ukrainian land. More on that in just a moment, but first the other headlines.
Our armed forces operate under the principle of preparing for the worst.
Taiwan on alert as China launches military drills around the island.
We don't have time to lose.
Kosovo Prime Minister hails election victory that ends months of political deadlock. Fake AI-generated women on TikTok call for Poland's exit from the European Union. Presidents Trump and Zelenskyy lauded the progress towards peace during their talks in Florida, with the US president insisting that Vladimir Putin was eager to end hostilities and make Ukraine prosper. Putin's response was a call to arms. Natalia Komarov has this report on the Florida talks and Moscow's reaction.
While Ukraine and the West intensify efforts towards peace, the Kremlin doubles down. Russia's top military brass gathered on Monday to hear an order from Putin: press on with the war.
The group continues offensive operations in the Zaporizhia region. The foremost units are now roughly 15 kilometers from the southern outskirts of the city of Zaporizhia.
How many? 15 kilometers?
Yes, around 15 kilometers to the outskirts.
Of course, we must continue the advance along with the Vostok group to liberate Zaporizhia.
This just a day after US President Donald Trump praised Putin's willingness to pursue peace as he hosted his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelenskyy at his Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida.
Russia's going to be helping. Russia wants to see Ukraine succeed. It sounds a little strange.
US and Ukrainian teams deliberated for nearly 3 hours.
We discussed all the aspects of the peace framework, which includes, and we have great achievements, 20-point peace plan, 90% agreed, and US-Ukraine security guarantees, 100% agreed.
This was the most crucial item on the agenda: post-war security guarantees for Ukraine, as similar as possible to NATO Article 5.
If Russia invades Ukraine, a coordinated military response will be launched, and all global sanctions against Russia will be reinstated.
Later, while answering questions from journalists, Zelenskyy specified that the guarantees are to last 15 years.
I really wanted the guarantees to be longer, and I told him that we would really like to consider the possibility of 30, 40, 50 years. And then this will be a historic decision by President Trump. The president said that he would think about it.
But two important issues remain unresolved. First, the future status of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, Europe's largest nuclear facility, which Russia wants to connect to its power grid, while Ukraine refuses to give it away. Second, potential territorial concessions, which, as Zelenskyy underlines, cannot be simply decided by diplomats. The Ukrainian president has proposed to hold referendum on the matter.
Of course, our society has to choose and has to vote, because it's their land, the land not of one person, it's the land of our nation.
The Ukrainian public overwhelmingly rejects the idea of ceding Donbas.
It's wrong to give up our territory. Yes, peace is important, but it must be a just peace.
Ukrainian lawmakers would also have to approve any terms for peace.
Nobody saw a detailed plan, actually action plan. We just see political will, we just see a framework. Even in Ukraine, in the parliament, we didn't discuss any particular or detailed plan.
So, what can Ukrainians really expect as the war is nearing its 5th year? More drone strikes and more deliberations between world leaders. Meanwhile, the Kremlin seems to rejoice, with Putin's envoy Kirill Dmitriev riding the waves. For TVP World, Natalia Komarov.
European leaders reacted with guarded optimism to the Florida talks and the fact that President Trump appeared ready to participate in any future security guarantees for Ukraine. Some were less diplomatic, stressing that Moscow was attempting to dictate peace terms. Our correspondent Alex Cadier is in Brussels to give us the latest on the European reaction. Good evening, Alex. Not a ton of enthusiasm in Europe, but at least no huge disappointment.
Yeah, certainly. Good evening, Adam. If you look back at previous meetings between these two men, it's understandable that there would have been a bit of nervousness before President Zelenskyy got to Mar-a-Lago. Back in February, that Oval Office bust-up meant that European leaders had to rush to Washington to try and heal the relationship between the Ukrainian president and Donald Trump. Now, no such bust-up this time, which would have been a relief for European onlookers, because at least the relationship between President Zelenskyy and President Trump remains stable. There was guarded optimism. We heard from Ursula von der Leyen hailing success when it comes to security guarantees. We also heard that from other leaders, including President Macron of France. We know that the Polish President Karol Nawrocki was also on a call with European leaders Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He insisted that any security guarantees, any security solution to end the war in Ukraine has to involve all parties involved, including Europe. We also saw the analysis from the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk.
After overnight talks with European leaders, one thing is certain: the West and Ukraine will lose this confrontation if Russia manages to divide us and dictate the terms of the peace. The declaration of US involvement in security guarantees is a success, but the talks are still far from over.
And of course, that warning by Prime Minister Tusk really setting up what the big question will be moving forward, which is, of course, what will Russia's response be? Because this plan so far has been drawn up with the help of the US, the Europeans, and Ukraine. We saw similar caution from the German government spokesperson.
We welcome President Trump's commitment to seeking a just and lasting peace in Ukraine that preserves Ukrainian sovereignty and European security. However, one thing is clear: it is up to Moscow to end the war. Without Russia, peace is not possible, and we certainly perceive a certain difference between what the Russian president allegedly says in talks and what is publicly announced, or what happened again over Christmas with attacks on Ukraine.
So, Alex, what is Europe's plan now?
Well, Europe's plan is to continue talking, to continue hashing out the details, Adam. We heard that from President Zelenskyy, who said that European powers and Ukraine and the United States would continue working at advisor level to hash out some of the details. And crucially, with any peace proposal, peace plan, the devil will be in the detail. We also heard from President Zelenskyy that at the start of January, all these coalition, the willing countries will meet, the leaders will meet in Paris to discuss, of course, the European part of what security guarantees could look like, knowing that they cannot do it alone, they cannot do it with the United States. Then we heard again from the Ukrainian leader that all those leaders will go to Washington, D.C. to try and finalize this deal, this plan with President Trump, hopefully moving the ball forward. For now, the process has not gone backwards, but to move forward, the devil will be in the detail, Adam.
This was Alex Cadier from Brussels. Thank you very much. While the future of Donbas and security guarantees for Ukraine may be at the top of the agenda for any settlement of the war, TVP World asked President Zelenskyy if US and Ukrainian negotiators agreed to demand the return of Ukrainian children kidnapped by Russia. Sonia Agata-Bishan reports.
A family reunion. Less than 2,000 Ukrainian children abducted by Russia experienced this, a fraction of Ukraine's confirmed figure of approximately 20,000 children forcibly deported by Russia, with the exact number likely being much higher. And responding to TVP World, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said there is no guarantee that Moscow will return the remaining children.
To be honest, we cannot be certain because we are dealing with Russia. This is the most difficult issue, and it is very important that our partners raise it. It is also very important that you, journalists, raise it, because if we don't talk about it, Russia will do everything to make this issue be forgotten.
But for now, the international community is talking about it. Earlier in December, the United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution denouncing forced transfers of Ukrainian children by 91 votes.
A child belongs with a family, with safety, with love, not in camps, institutions, or faraway places where he is kept under the control of those who abducted them, not under false names, false flags, or aggressive propaganda.
In a 2025 report on the issue for the Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE, a special rapporteur noted that of all atrocities endured by Ukraine, none may be so damaging as the abduction, deportation and Russification of Ukrainian children, particularly as these children are subjected to the latter in military patriotic camps.
It's actually envisaged that these children could one day take arms against the Ukrainian society, including their families in Ukraine. So this is really the connection with the cultural erasure of the identity of these children.
The same report suggests the erasure of the children's Ukrainian identity has been directed by top Kremlin leadership, also including by other means. Russian President Vladimir Putin enacted laws to simplify adoption and naturalization of Ukrainian children. He also instructed the military to support the transportation of children.
It is forbidden by international law for occupied powers to transfer civilians from the territory they live in to other territories. Children enjoy special protection under the Geneva Convention.
Putin's actions led to the International Criminal Court issuing an arrest warrant for him, a warrant that the ICC says will stand even if a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia is reached as far as the court is concerned. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Agatabishchan.
China has launched large-scale military drills in the waters around Taiwan, just as the US administration focuses on finalizing the Ukraine peace talks. Is America and its allies in Europe and Asia facing a confrontation on two fronts with the Dragonbear, as some call the alliance between Moscow and Beijing? Gabriela Fesnak has this story.
China's Navy, Air Force, Army and Rocket Force have been dispatched for drills around Taiwan, simulating the seizure and blockade of the island's key areas. Live fire drills are expected to follow on Tuesday.
The decision of whether to carry out this live fire shooting tomorrow lies with them. However, our armed forces operate under the principle of preparing for the worst, so they must take every possible scenario into account.
The drill, codenamed Operation Justice, is just the latest part of the Chinese military pressure campaign intended to intimidate the island and dissuade it from seeking independence.
These exercises are a stern punishment for the Taiwanese separatists' attempt to seek independence through armed means. They are a necessary action to safeguard national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Just days ago, the US announced the sale of one of its largest weapons packages to Taiwan, worth $11 billion. That move drew sharp protest from Beijing, which in turn sanctioned US defense firms. The Chinese operation was announced as the eyes of the world were set on Florida, where Volodymyr Zelenskyy met with Donald Trump to discuss peace plan details.
Of course, the timing is aligned very much with the Ukraine conflict and negotiation that is happening, and also focus of the Western world and Ukraine. But then, if you look at the timing, this is happening after the span between China and Japan.
In November, Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi incurred Beijing's wrath after stating that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could constitute a survival-threatening situation for Japan, justifying self-defense.
The live fire drill focuses that the traditionally is actually a lesson for both Japan and Taiwan.
On Sunday, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Moscow opposes Taiwan's independence and considers the island part of China. Lavrov also urged Japan to think carefully about its efforts to accelerate militarization.
Russia's principled position on Taiwan remains unchanged. Russia recognizes Taiwan as an integral part of China and stands against the island's independence in any form.
In conflict, that it wasn't just Russia that was fighting the war. China was absolutely behind the scene.
With Moscow firmly behind Beijing and Washington and Tokyo expressing their support for Taiwan's independence, the alliances fall in line with the broader shift toward a global geopolitical landscape defined by US-China rivalry. For TVP World, Gabriela Fesnak.
Kosovo Prime Minister Albin Kurti looks set to remain in power after his centre-left party decisively won snap parliamentary elections. The vote is poised to end a political stalemate in the small Balkan country, which broke away from Serbia 17 years ago. Paweł Trzaskowski explains.
He might not look it, but Albin Kurti, the leader of Vetevendosje, Albanian for Self-Determination, is happy. His party secured more than 49% of votes in Sunday's snap general election.
Once the results will be certified by Central Election Commission, we should swiftly constitute a parliament out of 10th legislature and then form immediately new government.
Depending on the final vote count, which will take several days, Vetevendosje will either be able to govern on its own or will need just a few MPs from the opposition to form a coalition government.
We don't have time to lose.
Mostly because Kosovo has already lost almost a year. After the last elections in February, Kurti's left-wing Albanian nationalist Vetevendosje party secured about 42% of the vote.
And was unable to form a government on its own, obviously, because it did not have an absolute majority, but also it turned out to be unable to find a coalition.
10 months of political turmoil followed. Kosovo was left
without institutions. The government was in a technical mandate.
Given the results of Sunday's ballot, the deadlock should be broken now. During these elections, the decisive votes for Kurti's Vetevendosje were to come from the supporters of the country's president, Vjosa Osmani,
who, with her diplomatic successes and in support with a few other countries, mainly with Turkey, they secured recognition of 3 countries, recognition of Kosovo by 3 countries, that was Sudan, Syria and lately Bahamas.
Osmani's latest diplomatic efforts mean that Kosovo is currently recognized by 110 countries. This and her support for Kurti's government is a solid starting point for her potential re-election as president next year, provided of course that there are no more deadlocks. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
Is Poland less Polish since joining the European Union 20 years ago? Not really, unless you listen to a handful of young Polish female patriots advocating for Polexit on TikTok. The only trouble with their patriotism is that they are entirely fake. Aisha Abachi has more.
Pretty, isn't she? But alas, you will never meet her. Or her, because they do not exist.
Yes, I want Polexit. Enough of Poland being governed from Brussels.
But the messages they're spreading could very much have real-life implications.
You see someone who you would not expect to present such views. So a beautiful person where you perhaps expect, a different type of conversation. And instead what you're hearing is, hey, this narrative about how we should leave the European Union. So I would say this is a very smart move.
The European analytical collective Res Futura warns that short videos calling for Polexit or Poland's exit from the European Union are appearing on the TikTok platform. The videos target people aged 15 to 25 and are generated by artificial intelligence. These videos and this account have since been taken down. Only last week, a survey showed that 24% of Poles are in favor of leaving the EU, including nearly 12% of people strongly supportive of the idea. Did these deepfakes move the needle?
AI regulations are a necessity. Such profiles can be created by the hundreds. This one generated 200,000 views and nearly 20,000 likes in 2 weeks. 10% is a very high ratio of likes to views. They can, of course, also be artificial, but they still impact the spread of content.
The EU's AI Act explicitly prohibits using artificial intelligence to spread political propaganda. Yet implementation is uneven, and in Poland, key EU digital rules are still awaiting ratification.
Mr. President, after a long legislative process, the bill implementing the Digital Services Act is now on your desk. We're beginning the fight against illegal content on the internet, not through censorship, but by increasing security and freedom of discussion online.
Poland is moving to tighten its online laws, but these incidents are far from isolated.
What we do know is that all kinds of bot accounts that were, promoting very right-wing agenda very nationalistic, anti-European agenda were coming from or were sponsored by Russia, Belarus, the allies of, polarized and internally divided Europe.
In the weeks leading up to the German elections in February 2025, voters were bombarded online with all kinds of disinformation and AI-generated content, especially to the benefit of the far-right Alternative for Germany, or AfD. As digital tools evolve faster than the laws meant to govern them, voters may soon find themselves deciding not just who to trust, but what is real. For TVP World, I'm Aisha Badja.
And now back to our main story, the Sunday talks between Presidents Trump and Zelensky, and today's reactions from Moscow and Europe. To discuss this, I'm joined by our Europe editor, Marcin Zaborowski. Good evening, Marcin. Welcome to the show.
Good evening.
So we heard earlier what Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk said after the talks. It is a success that the US declared to participate in security guarantees for Ukraine, but the conclusion of peace talks is still far off. Is this pessimism justified?
Well, I think it's not quite. I wouldn't call it quite pessimism. I think it's kind of a healthy skepticism. I think that we have a grounds to be optimistic about the U.S. engagement in the process, and we have grounds for optimism regarding Ukraine's willingness to go far with compromise. But we don't know how far, if at all, Russia is prepared to accept any of the conclusions which were being reached yesterday, and without Russia being at the table and without Russia accepting any of that, there's just no going forward. So, and we don't know, and I think that we don't. I think that it sounds like that Russia is sticking to its hardline position.
But even if we put that aside for a moment, Russia's approach, are we, is Europe, is Ukraine satisfied with what was agreed in Florida between Trump and Zelensky? Both said it was huge progress.
Well, this is a very imperfect situation, very imperfect reality. So Ukraine is at war, it's exhausted. The Ukrainian young men do not want to serve, so Ukraine does not have initiative in this process. And the European public opinion and American public opinion especially are growing tired of war which has been lasting for such a long time. And of supporting Ukraine. So, given that, I think rather imperfect conditions, I think the fact that the Donald Trump actually committed considerable time of energy and time to solve this issue, sit at the table with Jared Kushner, with Steve Witkoff, with the Secretary of State. It shows that America is very serious about being a mediator in this process. Not so much a part of a pro-Ukrainian coalition, but a mediator at this point in time. And following the Berlin discussions, it looks like that Europeans are ready to step in and provide security guarantees and provide troops, or at least air support when it's possible and when it's needed.
But what do you make of these comments from President Trump that, Putin wants Ukraine to succeed? We could see how Zelensky reacted to this statement. He held his tongue, but obviously his expression was, that this is nonsense.
We all know it is nonsense, really. So this reaction is not. It's not surprising, but under the Trump administration, the United States has changed its position in the whole process. So under the former administration of President Biden, the U.S. was really part of a pro-Ukrainian alliance or a coalition, if you like, however, without concluding result. Then Trump comes in with a very different approach, with his experience with the negotiations and mediation, and he shifts the position of the United States from being an ally of Ukraine to being a mediator. And being a mediator, he cannot take sides. So even when people at the press conference say, how come that you think that Russia could want peace if it led this massive attack on Ukraine only a couple of days ago? And then Trump responds to that, yes, but Ukraine is also attacking Ukraine, responding to that. So that's a clear indication that he wants to mediate, he doesn't want to take side. Which is not to say that it will not deliver results. If that's what's gonna bring some kind of at least a cessation of fire, then it will be a huge success, of course.
Right, I want to come back to what you just said, that there's no movement on Putin's side, but I was intrigued by a comment by the Ukrainian head of intelligence, General Budanov, who said just before the talks that while Putin may remain obsessed by the war, his immediate entourage, particularly the business people, are lured by the carrot of deals that President Trump and his negotiators are dangling before them. So we saw Kirill Dmitriev, who has been one of these businessmen involved in the talks, surfing in Miami. So, my question to you is, do you think these business people have enough influence to actually push Putin towards some kind of a concession?
I think it's clear that the world of business wants peace and wants this war to stop and wants to go back to business as usual with the United States, with Europe, and with the rest of the world. There is no doubt about it, but at the same time, the world of business in Russia is dependent on the will of President Putin, who has to deliver something which looks in his mind as a strategic success. And for now, it's President Putin which is calling shots. It's him who's deciding who actually stays business, who's out of business. So the oligarchs are not going to run against President Putin on that, and he still remains the man in charge for now.
So in other words, if I understood you correctly, you're saying Putin is not going to be swayed by his entourage.
Exactly. That'll be my reading of that. I think that
I'm sorry, Marcin, but that implies that we're back at square one, because despite all the mediation efforts by President Trump, if Putin doesn't move an inch, then Ukrainians will not move either, and so it seems like a race to who will hold Putin's ear, President Trump's ear at the latest moment.
Well, the truth is that we are all speculating here, because what's happening is really at press conferences that we see is part of a game, is part of a negotiating game, and even things like Russia running this massive rocket attack a couple of days ago is also part of negotiations. Or today's claim that Ukraine was responsible for attack on President Putin. That's, again, a negotiating tactic in my view. So what's happening behind that is another matter. And yes, there are growing pressures on Russia to come to some kind of agreement, to pack the success that it has. It already, has 20% of Ukrainian territory. I think that President Putin is already in a position when he could say, I went to this war and I got what I wanted. But whether that's enough for this man, that's another matter, really.
Marcin, we're running out of time, so last question, and please try to be concise. How do you see the Europeans handling this overall?
I think that we can be pleased with the way Europeans have been handling the situation, especially with ramping up, the strategic and defense abilities, and also inserting themselves into the negotiating process.
Marcin, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And that's all we've got for you, but please stay on with TVP World for more news and analysis.